Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshur-militan Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Dandavat pranams to all the assembled Vaishnavas. So we have come to chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita, and maybe we should close this door actually. And the window. Yeah, maybe the window too. It's a youth camp happening, so it's a very lively atmosphere around. So we've come to chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita. And so as we mentioned last week, right, that we finished the second chapter. The second chapter is giving an overview of all the contents of Bhagavad Gita. And now beginning in this third chapter, Krishna's coming in closer and discussing each of the individual yogas with more detail and more detail. So now this third chapter is Karma Yoga. So in this chapter, Krishna will be discussing this topic in more detail. And it starts with Arjuna. He's naturally a bit confused, right? Because Krishna has just been giving a summary of all the different yogas. So Arjuna's like, well, hang on. So like, what are you telling me? Right? Because you've been talking about all these different things. And Krishna was discussing Buddhi yoga, right? Yoga of wisdom. And so Arjuna's like, but hang on, you're telling me to fight. But then you've also said that, wisdom, which normally implies renunciation, detachment, you're saying that this is higher. So, this is a contradiction. On the one hand, you're telling me just to cultivate knowledge. On the other hand, you're telling me to go and fight. So, what should I actually do? So this is how this chapter begins. Yeah, so he's saying, I'm confused by your words. They're ambiguous, sometimes supporting action, sometimes supporting wisdom. So please tell me which is the most beneficial path for me to take. And I like this, because, in terms of ourselves as individuals, right? It's helpful for us to have many different points of view, helpful for us to have like clear understanding of different paths of progress. But then we also need to know what's specifically good for me, right? Because that's something else, right? So, it's helpful to have this kind of broad vision, broad understanding. But then when it comes down to, we need to know what's right for me. What's my path? What's my dharma? I can appreciate all these different paths and angles, but what is for me specifically best to go forward? And that's something that's mentioned more specifically later in Bhagavad Gita, right? Because there's that famous verse where Krishna says, it's better to die doing your own duty than it is to do somebody else's duty very well, right? So understanding what is our own path, what's our own lesson as distinct from others, that's very important for us as progressive individuals, right? So Arjuna's, feeling that in this moment. I appreciate everything you're saying, it's all true, but what about me? What's specific for me? So, and I mean, I think it's a really important thing to consider because it also helps us to respect others and appreciate others, but then also say, but that's not for me, right? So this kind of view can promote harmony in our circles of friends and community and so on. Yeah, what they're doing is great for them, but it's not my path, right? It's not my lesson. So now we've come to this verse 3, which is a bit tricky. The translation that we have is a little unclear. I will read it. So Krishna, Arjuna's asked this question. Krishna replies, O sinless one, I have described the two paths to be found in this world. The yoga of wisdom practiced by the realized and the yoga of selfless action. So that's jnana yoga and karma yoga. So yoga of wisdom how is that put here? Yeah, jnana yogena. That's generally referring to those who have like removed themselves, detached themselves from the world, and they're absorbed in their own spiritual practice and study. So that's jnana yoga. But then karma yoga is for those who are active in the world. They have different duties in the world. But although they're active in the world, they're internally cultivating detachment and trying to do everything in a spirit of duty and righteousness. So, and then we have in parentheses, both paths touch the beginnings of devotional practice, since the ladder to the plane of devotion is one, while the practice is twofold according to the stage attained. Yeah, this sentence is a little unclear. But basically, Krishna is saying is that, ultimately it's all one path, right? It's just that there are different stages on that path, because someone may begin practicing karma yoga, selfless action, but ultimately that will transform as the individual advances, that will transform into jnana yoga. So you could say, well, karma yoga, jnana yoga, they're ultimately one path, right? And then there's that other explanation that Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives, that karma, jnana, and karma, jnana, and bhakti, they're actually all the same path. And he calls it buddhi yoga, the yoga of wisdom. And that bhakti yoga is the perfection of all yoga, the perfection of Bhakti yoga is perfected yoga, and that's like synonymous with Buddha yoga. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to you?
No, can you elaborate a little?
Yeah, that, normally we think of, there being these different yogas of karma yoga, the yoga of action, selfless action, jnana yoga, the yoga of knowledge, and then bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion, right? So normally we discuss like this, there are these different yogas, but then this angle was given by Bhaktivinoda Thakur that actually there's just one path of yoga, and bhakti yoga is just the conclusion of it. It's like for example, you go to a school, like uh what's the name of the high school you went to?
East High School.
East High School. So you went through different classes there. So you could say, oh, I'm in seventh grade, right? Or eighth grade or ninth grade. But it's all East, what is it called? East High School? East High, it's all East High School, right? Or like you're doing a 3-year degree course, right? And you're in the first year, second year, third year, but it's all the same degree, actually. So from this angle, the perspective is that there's just one path of yoga, and that is called Buddhi yoga. And then Bhakti yoga is like when you graduate.
And I have a question about that. So, how can we ensure that we're not mistaken selfless yoga versus devotional yoga?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Uh, can you say it again? Selfless yoga and devotion. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very, I don't know if you heard Ati Sunji's asking, how can we distinguish between whether we're practicing karma yoga or bhakti yoga? And it's a good question because they can often look the same, sometimes. And also karma yoga, it is very transferable to bhakti yoga. Karma yoga it gives like a good foundation for going to bhakti, because basically bhakti yoga, you could say bhakti yoga is karma yoga plus Krishna. So while in bhakti, so like for example, um, let's say you have some particular duty, um, of whatever it may be, let's say raising some kids, you have that duty. Then in karma yoga, you'll be like, I'm a mother, it's my duty to raise my kids. And I'm not doing that for any gain. I'm not doing that because I'm thinking if I raise them really well, then they're going to become millionaires and they're going to take care of me in my old age. And I'm not thinking, I'm not calculating like that. But I'm just thinking it's my duty to be. it's my duty to be a good mom. And okay, okay. You need to turn the, okay, you got it. So yeah, I'm not calculating any specific benefit that I'll get from raising these children, but I'm a mom, these are my kids, it's my duty to raise them and help them become wholesome people in the world. And what happens after I've raised them, that's, that's a separate matter. That's up to them, that's up to God, that's up to my karma. I just want to do my duty properly, and I'm not calculating what I'm getting out of it. That's karma yoga. But then in bhakti yoga, that will be there, that you're not doing it for yourself. So your own ego is not involved with that. But then there's like plus the aspect of offering them to Krishna. Like not just that they don't like karma yoga would be they don't belong to me. Like they don't owe me anything. They I don't they're not my property. But then in bhakti, it would be like they belong to Krishna. So there's the aspect of not having your personal ego involved, which is karma ego, but then plus the aspect of wanting to offer them to Krishna. And seeing that actually they're also servants of Krishna. And I'm taking care of them as servants of Krishna, as they're Krishna's property. So karma yoga is like they're not my property, but then bhakti yoga is like they're Krishna's property. So they connect really well. And so you will see like that they are maybe they're not aware of their relationship with Krishna, but it's there. It's potentially there, and they ultimately belong to Krishna. So you may love them more because of that, actually, because like that's the thing that's so beautiful in bhakti yoga, because you're connecting with the source of love and you see everything as connected with that source. So it actually becomes easier to love others, and it'd be more natural to love others more because you see they have a connection with the source of all love, right? And I love Krishna, and I love everything that's connected to Krishna, which is ultimately everything, right? So does that make sense? Yeah. 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 Okay. Okay, so Krishna's replied by saying, I have described these two paths. And Bhima, did you find that? Do you want to read that translation? And I have it.
Which verse was it? I'm sorry.
It was verse 3.
Verse 3. So it says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O sinless Arjuna, I have already explained that there are two classes of men who try to realize the self. Some are inclined to understand it by empirical philosophical speculation, and others by devotional service.
Okay. Suvasini, I remember it was actually, we looked in Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's edition. And that was a nice translation, but I didn't bring it. I have it on my iPad.
I can look it up. It's like the word Sankhyanam, right?
Yeah,
that
we
is
were
the
discussing
word
that
there.
word too, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, he was saying even the persons who are probably the Sankhyanam, the ones who's come to the path of Gyan, that controlling, this, withdrawing from the world and everything, and controlling the senses, and he quoted that verse, Thani Sarvani Samyamya, that verse from the second chapter. He said, but ultimately, unless one is dedicating themselves to the Lord, that connecting with the Lord, they can one day control the senses in that way. That is what he said, like that. So, yeah.
Okay.
I can find that one.
I think it's okay though. I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I got it here. Yeah.
But I mean, basically what Krishna is saying is there are these two paths. There's karma yoga and jnana yoga. And depending on your stage of realization, then one or the other will be more appropriate for you, right? So if you're someone, you have a nature to be very involved in the world, you're attached to many things, then to try and practice renunciation and all these things, that's going to be artificial, right? So better practice karma yoga. You can do all those same things, but just try and do this and make this internal shift, right? Of detaching yourself, for detaching your ego from that. So you can do the same thing, but understand that you are not ultimately the doer. Nothing actually belongs to you, but you can express your nature and engage in a wholesome way in the world, in a way that suits you, right? So then that would be karma yoga. But then if you have an inclination towards renunciation, spiritual study and so on, then you can go to jnana yoga, right? The yoga of knowledge. Okay, I think that's clear enough, I think, right? So we can go on. Yeah, so then this fourth verse, Krishna is saying, like, there's no point in trying to artificially detach yourself. You can't, that's not going to get you anywhere. One cannot attain freedom from action by refraining from action, nor can one attain fulfillment by renunciation alone, right? If someone just like pretends that they're detached, like in an artificial way, that's not going to get them anywhere, because that attachment's still within the heart. So to artificially remove yourself from certain things, it's useless.
Yeah.
No one can refrain from activity for even a moment. Everyone is impelled to act by the modes of material nature. Right, one who externally restrains their hands, legs, and other senses of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, is a fool. Know him to be a hypocrite. So better is someone who, they may be married, but they've stabilized their senses and they're practicing this karma yoga. So perform your prescribed duties, since to be active is better than idleness. I forgot you were meant to be resting, right? Yeah.
No. Meant to be service.
Yeah, I was making you feel guilty for not hosting, but I forgot. Yeah, and Ananda's been up from very early and he only got 3 hours of sleep. So yeah. So perform your prescribed duties, since to be active is better than idleness. Inactive persons cannot even maintain their existence. By giving up fruitive action and performing your obligatory duties, your heart will be purified. Surpassing the plane of renunciation, you will attain pure devotion, transcendental to the mundane plane. Okay, so now number 9. Now this is one of the famous verses of Bhagavad-gītā, and one of the key verses of karma yoga. This yagyartat karmano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhana tad artam karma kunteya mukta sangha samachara. This translation is also a bit much, but we'll read it. Selfless duty performed as an offering to the Supreme Lord is called yagya. So this is an expanded translation. But this explanation is being given, right? That yagya, expanded translation. So there's one verse in the scriptures, we heard Gurudev quote this before. It says, Yagyo vai Vishnu, means yagya means Vishnu. What does that mean? That yagya, we tend to think of it as like this fire sacrifice, as this like ceremonial fire sacrifice. But actually, essentially, it just means a sacrifice. That's yagya. And then this verse, Yagyo vai Vishnu, Yajna is Vishnu, that means that yajna is a sacrifice that is made for Vishnu, for the Lord. This is the real meaning of sacrifice. O Arjuna, all action performed for any other purpose is the cause of bondage in this world of repeated birth and death. Therefore, remaining unattached to the fruits of action, perform all your duties in the spirit of such sacrifice. Then we have in parentheses, such selfless action is the way to begin devotional practice, gradually realize the presence of the Lord, and ultimately attain pure devotion, transcendental to the modes of material nature. So yagyartat karmanonyacha lokoyam karma bandhana. So it's actually quite a heavy statement. It's saying literally what it's saying is anything that you do other than what is yagya is karma bandhana, means it's binding you in karma. So anything that you do that's not, as you know, in service and mood of sacrifice of the Lord, you're incurring some karmic reaction, right? And so tad artam karma kuntya mukta sangha samaj. So being free from this mukta sangha, from this attachment, right? Mukta sangha, being free from attachment. Engage in your karma, engage in your duty, be active in the world, but do it in a spirit of this sacrifice, this yajna. So, if you're afraid of karma, the solution is not to avoid everything and hide in a cave, but the solution is making that internal adjustment, right? Of making everything an offering, a sacrifice. Oh yeah, sure. Okay, then we'll go to the audio. We've come to verse 10 here. Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry. So we're in chapter 3, Karma Yoga. You can go ahead a little bit.
Ivame tadekam anishtha pura prokta maya nagha jnana yogena sankhyanam karma yogena yoginam na karmana manarambha na iskarmam purusosnute na cha sannyasanadeva siddhim samadhigacchati niyamya arabhate arjuna कर्मेन्द्रियै कर्मयोगावसक्तस्य विशिष्यते नियतं कुरु कर्मत्वं कर्म ज्यायोच्छ कर्मणः शरीरयात्रापि च ते न प्रसिद्धेद कर्मणः यज्ञार्थात् कर्मणोऽन्यत्र लोकोऽयं कर्मबन्धनः तदर्थं कर्म कौन्तेय मुक्तसङ्गः समाचर सहयज्ञः प्रजा सृष्ट्वा पुरोवाच प्रजापति अनेन प्रसविष्यद्धं मेष भूस्तिष्ठ कामधु देवान् भावयतानेन ते देवा भावयन्तु वा परस्परं भावयन्तः श्रेयः परमवाप्स्यतः इष्टान् भोगं वो देवा दर्शन्ते यज्ञभावितः तैर्दत्ता न प्रदायैर्भो जो भुक्तेस्तेनैव स यज्ञशिष्टाशिनः सन्तु मुच्यन्ते सर्वकिल्बिषैः भुञ्जते ते त्वघं पापा ये पचन्त्यात्मकारण अन्नाद् भवन्ति भूतानि पश्चन्नादन्न संभव यज्ञाद् भवति पर्जन्यो यज्ञः कर्म समुद्भव कर्म ब्रह्मोद्भवं विद्धि ब्रह्माक्षर समुद्भवम् तस्मात् सर्वगतं ब्रह्म नित्यं यज्ञे प्रतिष्ठितम् एवं प्रवर्तितं चक्रं नानुवर्तायति हज अघायुरिन्द्रिया राम मोहं पार्थ सजीवति जस्त्वात्मरतिरेव स्यात् आत्मतृप्तश्च मानवः आत्मन्येव च सन्तुष्टः तस्य कार्यं न विद्यते नैव तस्य कृतेनार्थो नाकृतेनेह कश्चन नो चास्य सर्वभूतेषु कश्चिदर्थपपाश्रय तस्मादसक्तसततं कार्यं कर्म समाचर अरक्तोच्छाचरं कर्म परमाप्नोति पुरुषः कर्मणैव हि संसिद्धि मास्थिता जनकादयः लोकसंग्रहमेवापि सम्पश्यन् कर्तुमर्हसि.
Okay, so we've gone up to verse 20 here. So now in these verses, we've just been through, Krishna's actually explaining the principles of the Varnashrama system, right? This is the ancient system of India, right? That it's basically a way of living in harmony with the environment, right? Because there's an awareness that, everything that we have, it comes from somewhere, and there's energy involved, right? The way that we live nowadays in modern life, it's actually very disconnected, like from the origins of things. We go to the supermarket and, well, you probably grow a lot of your own things, right?
I have. Not every year, but yes.
But generally, right, we go to the supermarket, we buy potatoes, and we're quite disconnected actually from like all the energy and all the people that were involved. And so this style of living actually like promotes this self-centeredness, you could say. But and so this is the Vedic culture, right? That there's this deep awareness of the fact that there's so much energy behind everything that comes to us, and then specifically there's this awareness that what's being described here of the devas, right? So the rain, there's consciousness behind everything, right? So the rain that comes that feeds our crops, there's a conscious being causing that to happen. He has a name, Lord Indra. And so let's appreciate, thank you, thank you, Lord Indra, for helping us with this. Otherwise, what would we do? So there's that's this is what the system is based around, and so therefore that's why there are these like special sacrifices and prayers and offerings that are made to these devas, because it's a way of just appreciating. There's an exchange going on, right? And nothing's coming for free, right? Nothing's coming from nowhere. And so it's a way of honoring and appreciating those who are enabling us to live, right? To live and eat and breathe and so on. And then in that way, you're also inviting blessings upon yourselves from all these entities. Right? Then in Krishna consciousness, right? In the practice of Krishna bhakti, it's a little different because there's this awareness that Krishna is right at the center of all of that. And Krishna is the source of energy for these devas, and we'll so that comparison's given of the root of a tree. So we'll just go to the root. We'll honor the root, connect with the root, and then we're not, we're kind of like excused from this process of like specifically worshiping all of these different devas. So this verse 10 in the beginning, Lord Brahma manifested the progeny of the world along with sacrifices. He instructed them thus: take shelter of this religious principle of sacrifice, prosper and flourish. May such sacrifice be the bestower of the things you desire. Verse 11, propitiate the gods by sacrifices, so please them, make them happy, and may they satisfy you by bestowing your desired fruits. In this way, through mutual nourishment, you will be the gainers of great auspiciousness. So, this is applying to someone who, wants to gain something in the world, right? They want to have opulence and so on. And that's fine, but do it in this honorable way, please the devas, please the gods, and they will also take care of you, right? And so in the Vedic tradition, right, there are specific deities that you'll pray to, right? So there's Saraswati, right? She's the goddess of knowledge. Lakshmi is the goddess of wealth, and so on. So, and we also hear that actually they also get some benefit from that. Like, because we were going in our Saturday meeting, right? We're going through the section on Prahlad Maharaj, and we heard because Hiranyakashipu, he was creating havoc on the Earth planet, and so the residents of Earth, they weren't able to make the sacrifices that they normally make to the devas. But then we hear that the devas, they were also disturbed because they couldn't receive the benefit of those offerings that were being made to them. So as it's saying here, there's an exchange going on here. They're helping one another, actually. So propitiated or pleased by sacrifices, the gods, my worldly representatives, will bestow upon you all your desired, enjoyable things. But one who enjoys what is given by the gods without offering it to them is a thief, right? To live in that kind of consciousness of receiving so much, but then not honoring like where it came from. That's like saying here, it's like a thief. It's a very selfish and, disconnected way to live, without awareness of what's the energy that's behind everything that's come. So we're in verse 13. By accepting sacrificial remnants of the universal gods, virtuous persons are liberated from all sins arising from violence towards other living entities. So this is another point, right? Because everything that we use, there's, even if we are using it in a careful way, there's some type of damage that's at the back of that. So like, for example, we may be vegetarian or vegan, but those vegetables are also living entities, right? So you've basically killed the cauliflower that you're going to eat for lunch. So you're incurring karma. Even if you're not, it's not that you want to cause disturbance, but it's simply this world is made on that. It's just the nature of this world that you cannot breathe, without, you're also killing living entities when you're breathing, right? And then you hear about the Jains, right? This is one, no, you wouldn't call it a sect of Hinduism, would you? Jains, no.
I remember walking through a village once and they were sweeping in front of them and they had the masks on and
Okay.
just,
yeah.
But still, I mean, even through the masks,
yeah,
microscopic.
Yeah.
See, they do their best.
Yeah. Shama Gopal was mentioning he witnessed this once. Sometimes the Jains, they'll wear these masks to try and, well, at best, just minimize, right, the disturbance that they're creating on the environment. Sweeping, you said.
Slow and
Really? Just like in their daily activities.
get from point A to point B.
Wow.
Step on.
Wow, I never heard of that. So Prabhu's saying that he's seen like sweeping in front of them as they walk to avoid stepping on anything. I came across a group of them once. They were all completely naked. Ananda was there. It was one of our pilgrimages, and it was on the highway. They had like a big procession. We'd stopped like for a toilet break or something, and I was quite shocked, actually. I didn't know that was one of their practices.
Yeah, that wasn't the ones that I did.
Okay,
Is that because clothing can somehow kill?
The production of clothing.
Maybe.
Like, you
Yeah.
grow the plants.
Yeah, two kind. They wear white cloth and they are Digambar and Shitambar. So one they wear white cloth and other are naked. As you saw them.
Okay, Prabhu's, he's saying there are two types.
Yeah.
Two
Yeah.
types. So there were white
I read
cloth
about them. Yeah.
You read about it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I see. So, and welcome, Ramananda Guru. Great to have you with us.
Dandavas.
Dhanyavad. So you'll find some persons, right? They'll go to great extremes to minimize their violence upon the environment. But the truth is that it's actually just impossible. It's impossible because that's just the nature of this world, right? And so Krishna is saying here, by following this principle of sacrifice, then that's the only way to be excused, right? Otherwise, you're also implicated in all of these different karmic reactions. But by living in the spirit of sacrifice, offering everything that you receive, then you can be excused from that. Okay, so verse 14. The living beings' bodies are manifest from food. Food is manifest due to rain. Rainfall ensues from the performance of sacrifice, and action is the cause of sacrifice. Action is prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas originate in Akshara, the imperishable. That's referring to Brahman, I think, right? Yeah, Akshar, what is that? Does that literally mean like infallible or imperishable? Okay. And that I think is, yeah. It's Suvasniti, is that referring to Brahman, would you say, this Akshara?
I think so. Usually Akshara, this Om is called Akshara, right? Or they will have this Brahman
Okay.
or Akshara.
Okay.
But yeah, it refers probably to Brahman, I think.
Okay. Therefore, the all-pervading, imperishable Lord is ever present within the acts of sacrifice offered to him. O Arjuna, one who does not respect this natural causal cycle leads a life of sin, enjoying the senses in vain. Yet there is no duty to fulfill for the realized person who delights within the self, being fully satisfied within. So someone who's completely free from any type of attachment, the rules change for them because they're not engaged, they're not incurring any karma because they're just so, their ego is just removed from everything. And so they can, in a sense, they can live more freely, whereas persons who are more in embodied consciousness and living with attachment, they have to be more careful and to follow these systems of honoring and sacrificing everything because they're engaged, they're involved with the world of karma. But then someone who's fully detached, living within the plane of the soul, they're not obliged to do anything. They are excused from these, systems of living, right? And in our case, as I said earlier, although we are still, within the world of attachment, we are also excused because we're trying to live the life of surrender. We're not coming with some agenda of trying to achieve this or this or this, but we're coming in the path of surrender to Krishna, who's the source of everything. So we're also excused for many of these, systems and rituals and obligations, for worshiping all these different deities, because we're kind of putting ourselves at the mercy of Krishna, who is the source of everything, who's the center of everything. So we're also like in a different category because of that. Kind of like, we're friends with the boss, you could say, or we have an affectionate relationship with the boss, and so we can skip the bureaucracy in a sense, something like that. But it's a tricky thing too, because we also have to keep that level of humility and honesty that, well, we're aspiring for that, like not that we're liberated souls and we can do anything because it's for Krishna, so we also have to keep some awareness, like our Gurudev, he talked about how like some in the beginning, in the early years of the Krishna consciousness movement, when Prabhupada came to America, then like some of the early devotees in the West, they were they were like kind of simple with this idea, right? And they would sometimes like steal things and do different things that were illegal, but they had the idea that, oh, we're doing it for Krishna, so yeah, we can do whatever we want, it's okay, But the fact is, we're aspiring devotees, and we're not liberated. We're still in an embodied state, and so we will still be responsible for some karmic reactions. So no, we can't go rob a bank for Krishna, or which has actually happened. We'll try to live within the bounds of society's rules and all these things. The liberated, our Gurudev was talking about this once, and he's saying the liberated soul, and it's also mentioned in Gita, they can do anything. And there's one verse in Bhagavad-Gītā which is very strong and a little heavy to digest in this regard, where Krishna says, someone who's acting without the ego, they could kill the whole world and they wouldn't incur any reaction.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty extreme. And not that, obviously not that Krishna's advocating that, but he's making a point. Like, even if you did something so extreme, but you did it truly with the sense of duty and truly without any ego, then you won't take any karma. But it has to really be from that point. It has to really be from that standpoint. And so we will be very careful, about these things, because we'll think, well, I'm not a liberated soul. And so, I'll be reasonable in my behavior, try to follow the general guidelines, right? Okay, so verse 18. In this world, he neither gains by action nor loses by inaction. He does not depend on any other being, from Lord Brahma down to the simplest life form, for any purpose. So, perform your prescribed duties without attachment. By selflessly executing one's duties, a person attains liberation. True liberation is the state of pure devotion, attained in the maturity of selfless action. King Janaka and other learned personalities succeeded in attaining devotion through the execution of their prescribed duties. So it is fitting that you fulfill your duty in consideration of the welfare of the people. So he's saying, like, through practicing karma yoga, that can ultimately transition to bhakti yoga. And Krishna is mentioning this example of King Janaka and mentioning this point, like, in consideration of the welfare of the people, because sometimes you may do something just to show the example to others, right? That, you may have people who look up to you, or children or something, and you need to show them an example. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, like, even if you didn't really need to go and fight in this battle, it's good to do it just to show others, it encourages others who are trying to do their duty. So it's like, you're doing the right thing, then we're all going to try and do the right thing. So it is your duty to you're a kshatriya, you're a warrior. It's your duty to protect people.
Isn't that like isn't that part of the premise of the whole story? Is Krishna's setting this all up for us? Like the story is for us.
Well, yeah, that too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's a but
Well, same kind of idea, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, that many things, they will happen just for or are done just for the sake of teaching us something, right? Not because they had to happen, right? But for our benefit. Yes. So, okay. So that was verse 20. Let's see, we can maybe go through a few more verses. Suvasini, do you want to mention anything at this point?
No, Ishaka, no, don't have anything to say. That's fine. And the akshara, it is like I just looked up, it's imperishable, something imperishable, kshara and akshara. So what is changeable and unchangeable? That's kshara is changeable and akshara unchangeable. Like
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, just maybe a few more verses.
Sattadacarasi shrestha sattadevi tarujana chayat pramanam krute lokastad anuvartate nami patthasti kartavyam trishu lokeshu kinchana nana vaptam avaptavyam vatta eva cha karmani jadi chang na vatteyam yatu karma tandrita mama vattanu vattante manusya parsa sarvasa ussiteyurime loka na kurchang karma chedaham sankarsya cha kartasya upahanyami mang praja sakta karmanya vidvansu yatha kurbanti bharat कुर्याद् विद्वां तथा शक्त चिकीर्षु लोक संग्रहम् न बुद्धिभेदं जनयेत् अज्ञानं कर्म संगिनाम् जुयेत् सर्वकर्माणि विद्वान् युक्तः समाचरन्.
Okay, I think that's a good place to stop. We can go through these verses. Now this verse, it has a special place in the hearts of our community. This verse 21, Yad Yad Acharati Shishtas Tatta Deve Tarojanaha Sayat Pramanam Krute Lokastad Anuvartate. The masses follow the ways of great men, following the standards they set. And I think many of you know this history, right? That when Srila Sridhar Maharaj first joined his Guru Maharaj's mission, the Gaudiya Math, Srila Saraswati Thakur chanted this verse, right? Because Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he was someone of prominence within society. He came from a very high level Brahmin family. They grew up speaking Sanskrit, household Sanskrit, very cultured, educated, intelligent, learned people. And so Saraswati Thakur was pleased about this because he thought, if we have someone like this in our group, then the general people, they'll naturally feel more respect for what we're doing. And they will also be inclined to look into this. Oh, if someone like that is following this, there must be something there, right? Saraswati Thakur himself came from a lower caste, right? And so that sometimes caused, that was sometimes an obstacle for some people in joining the mission, because generally they would want a guru who comes from a higher caste. And so therefore some of these highly situated disciples like Srila Sridhar Maharaj, and another one was Bhakti Saranga Goswami Maharaj. Persons like this, they were a great support to his mission. So, of course, from the absolute angle of vision, it doesn't matter, right? What your background is, your birth, and all these things. But we live in a relative world, right? And so the reality is that these things have some place, right? And so, yeah, and so Srila Saraswati Thakur was seeing from that vision. So then that also means that if we have some type of position where people are looking to us or following us, then we need to show an example, right? We need to show a standard. Even if we don't need to do it for ourselves, we need to show that to others, for their sake, for their benefit. And then verse 22, O Arjuna, I have no duty in the three worlds. I lack nothing, and there is nothing to be attained by me, and yet I myself am active. O Arjuna, if ever I do not engage attentively in duties, then all men following my example will give up their duties. If I do not engage in duty, the people of these worlds will renounce their duties and fall to ruination. Thus, I will be responsible for their downfall, caused by adulterated progeny. O Arjuna, as ignorant persons work with attachment, the wise too must work, but without attachment, in order to guide the general people who exist in the plane of worldly action. They differ not in their work, but in their attitudes of attachment and detachment. The scripturally learned teacher should not create confusion in the minds of ignorant attached men by apparently advocating the neglect of duty for the cultivation of knowledge. Rather, he should set the example of selflessness in fulfilling duties, thus encouraging the ignorant in the performance of their prescribed duties. So, giving up the world, living a life of renunciation, that's not for everyone, And some people may do that just like as a type of laziness, right? Like, I don't want to deal with work, I don't want to deal with family, I'll just join the temple. That'd be easier, And that's, it's not necessarily appropriate for everyone. But if you're going to do that, then it should come from a place of wanting to make genuine spiritual progress, right? And there was one incident I saw with our Gurudev. I've mentioned this before, but where there was one devotee who he had like 3 or 4 young children, and this was in Navadvip, a Western devotee, and the children were kind of neglected. They were like, quite wild, running around, not dressed so well, maybe not so clean. And you could see like they weren't really being cared for so well. But this devotee, he was very enthusiastic, and one day he came to Gurudev and he was asking Gurudev's blessings. He wanted to publish a book, some book from our gurus. I don't remember what it was exactly. So he was telling our Gurudev very enthusiastically about this project. I want to publish this book, and will you give your blessings? And our Gurudev responded by telling him, I bless you to have another child. It's like classic Srila Govinda Maharaj, like very humorous and indirect, And to me, I don't think that devotee got it, he like just laughed, But to me, it was clear, like Gurudev was telling him, you have a family in front of you and take care of, like, that's your first duty right now. Don't be jumping and doing having all these lofty ideas and projects. You're going to do this amazing service, but you have something right in front of you, take care of that. You have some duty with that. First manage that, So, yeah. Yeah, so to tell someone to give up their duty and, just study Bhagavad-gītā or join the temple, that's not necessarily progressive. It depends on the individual. It depends on the individual. And so sometimes the best thing for a teacher, is to just show that example of doing your duty, whatever it is, do it properly. Yeah, and another thing though too is it's an interesting verse. Another way that I take this verse sometimes is just, sometimes you'll have persons who are attracted to Krishna consciousness, but they're not really able to go into some of the more, subtle aspects of the conception or the practice and but you don't need to take them there. You don't need to confuse them by giving them too much information, but find a way that they can engage, find a way in which they can connect, and encourage them and nourish them with that, and that's perfect. It's not that everyone has to immediately jump to understanding everything, right? But just connect in some way at some point, and that's fulfilling, actually. At any level that you're connecting with this, you will be fulfilled, right? I think that's a good place to stop. Then this next verse 27, this is quite interesting. We can have a more extensive discussion on it next week. Okay, so we're going to stop at verse 26. And does anyone want to share any thoughts? Maybe Bimal Prabhu, you always have some insightful words to share.
I'll try to ramble on quickly, like I always ramble, but that made me think of Sudarshan. He's a great example. Like Gurudev, he actually went to Gurudev and he wanted to go and serve at the temple and dedicate himself there, but Gurudev actually told him to go back and work his job. So, but you look at that progression through time now, and like Sudarshan, through his works and everything, like he runs a temple, he maintains, he supports different devotees. He does so many things because of his working a job, So I think it's all kind of that perspective of just fulfilling our duties. It doesn't necessarily mean like devotional service obviously can mean a lot of different things, but we do have like I have a family that I have to maintain. And sometimes, when you're trying to live in a life of surrender and everything, when you say that everything is the will of the Lord, like sometimes, like I'll be out doing menial tasks like digging in dirt, like clearing weeds and things, and I'm trying to think like, how am I Krishna conscious doing any of this, But ultimately it comes down to our intention and realizing sometimes that we may not know why we're doing certain things, but with the surrendered attitude, we try to just fulfill these things. We try not to be attached to the outcome because we don't really know. It's fun to see kind of things that happen, the progressions in our lives where we don't understand a certain situation. But I think through some reflection, we've all probably had these things happen where we can look back in our lives and go, wow, so that happened and it actually led me to here, which was, we never fully understand why, but Sudarshan always says, like, Krishna's our friend, he's our well-wisher. Our gurus tell us this, and it's just important because like we can, even people that are not necessarily Krishna consciousness, they're all going through their lives, but it's like they're still fulfilling Krishna's will in an indirect way. They're all getting worked on, and we all get worked on in what we need in our lives. And luckily, some of us are fortunate enough with some Sukriti that we've come and we've had connection with the Vaishnavas, and Srila Gurudev. And I wanted to just say how happy I was just to hear Gurudev's voice today, chanting the verses is really sweet. But anyway, those are just some thoughts I've had because, in our own lives, we all have our duties, but without Krishna consciousness, it gets really mundane really fast. And if we're attached to these things, I mean, you're going to go down really quick. You have to have some higher level, but like, I forget these things all the time. So to have association with devotees like yourselves, it really brings me up and helps my consciousness and actually try to live that life. So I appreciate you all, and my dandavats to you all. I wish I was down there in SoCal and tell my wife I miss her. I'd love to talk to her at some point. I know she's super busy. Anyway, my dandavats to you all. Happy to see you.
This is a Vaishnava family. They really have Krishna at the center. Well, we're really appreciating your beautiful family. Bimal Prabhu has his lovely wife, Ishadevika, who's helping a lot with the running of this festival now, and his children are also here, all lovely children, and we're happy we can connect with you at least on Zoom, although we miss your presence very much, Prabhu. And thank you so much for sharing those words. And it was really wonderful to be able to see the way that Srila Govinda Maharaj was so personal, and how he dealt with everyone, and the fact that he was really prioritizing the welfare of the individual over like the society even, because I know of many, like you've mentioned another example, and I know several others, Suvasini Didi's brother, also Anand, he also had that experience. He wanted to come join the temple, but Gurudev said, no, go back and work your job, And we saw many cases like that, where he just gave very individual advice. He wasn't just trying to fill up the temple and, make as much money as possible and whatever, but he was really thinking about what's best for this individual, here and now. And you going back to Sudarshan, he also tells that story, like he had a huge donation to give. It was like $20,000, $200,000, and he was ready to give it to Gurudev, and Gurudev didn't take it. That is not necessary for it. It's not necessary. I mean, it's extraordinary, I mean, obviously he needed money for his mission, and he accepted that from others, but in that particular instance, Gurudev, for his own reasons, he was trying to teach something else to Sudarshan, I don't need money, actually. That's not what this is about. So, and obviously he accepted in other cases devotees who wanted to join, but it was all join the temple, but it was highly, personal, the advice that he gave. In my case, I asked him in the beginning to come live in Navadvip, and at that time he said no. He said, go do your studies. But then 6 months later, he changed his mind, and he asked me himself, if I could stay, So again, it was something, dynamic and very personal. So again, showing this instruction that, it's not that everything's for everyone, and everyone has a different path that is the most appropriate for them, for their advancement. So, okay, well, maybe we'll stop here for today. Any last words from anyone? Maybe Suvasini Didi, you'd like to add anything?
Thank you very much, Vishaka Didi. Sorry I joined a little late, but it was amazing. Very much. Thank you.
Happy you can join us, Prabhu.
No, Vishaka, I don't have anything to add here. Thank you. Very nice.
Okay. Well, thank you all. Thank you for being here with us. And we have our sweet group here. And so tomorrow, also at the later time, 1 hour later, because of the programs going on here, then we'll have our meeting. And next week we'll be back at the usual time. Okay, we'll wish you all
Today is also Bhakti Chandan Parvat Maharaj disappeared today. I don't know. There is any program?
Today is Parvat Maharaj's disappearance day, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I will look in calendar, yeah.
Okay. Jai Shripad Parvat Maharaj.
Dandava.
He stayed here in SoCal for so many years. Did so much service for the mission. Thank you for pointing that out, Prabhu. We're happy to remember him. Okay, well, we'll close for today. Jai Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. ЩРީМАD BHAGAVAD-GÍTÂ ki Jai. All the assembled devotees ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande. Haribol.
Shakadidi.
Done was.
Dandavad. See you all next time.